All right, so we had left off last time having allowed the prey isoocline to show some realism. But that's all we had done. And to remind you what we want to try to do, we got this far. We allowed the prey isoocline to show density dependence so that we don't have this ridiculous assumption that predators are the only thing that regulate prey. But we haven't gotten refuges, and we haven't done anything to the predator isoocline just yet to make that more realistic. And so we'll pick up today starting showing you this again and then moving on to this. So what we pointed out last time is if you allow competition to occur here, well, logistic growth to occur here, and then competition to occur here by carrying capacity, then the prey isoocline is no longer a straight line, it's now a humped curve. And so the dynamics of this predator-prey system, as it was originally invented, depend on where the intersection is. If the intersection is on the left, you get spiraling to extinction. Depending on where you start, it might be the prey that go extinct, or it might be the predator that goes extinct. The predator could go extinct if it starts in this area. But if it's approximately at the peak, then you once again have 4 almost equal-sized regions, and you get stable cycling. You get the lynx hare cycle. And as long as you don't go too far off this, you'll get stable cycling. If the intersection is on the right, however, you get stable coexistence. You get spiraling into coexistence. And once again, as long as you don't get too far away from this, so like a massive perturbation, this is a stable system. Okay, but we still don't have anything that looks like a prey refuge. Now, as I mentioned last time, we're not going to bother trying to incorporate a prey refuge into these equations because that's really ugly. And it's really hard to work with equations that try to do something complicated like that. In fact, it's very difficult even for really advanced mathematics to deal with that. So all we're going to do is modify the graph to show what a prey refuge would look like in practical terms. What would it look like on that graph if we allowed the prey to escape from their predators at some density? So think of it this way. You have a log, and your predator can't get at you if you're under the log. So as long as your population is small, you can all shelter under the log, and nobody can eat you. But as your population grows, some of you are going to be forced out from under that log, and those are the ones that are going to get eaten. But even if the predator eats all of you that are outside the log, the ones under the log are always safe, and they can always reproduce and make your population increase again. So if we were to modify that MacArthur-Rosenzweig type humped isoocline to incorporate a prey refuge, what would it look like? Okay, well, let's just look at a density-dependent predator, which is the line straight up and down. There's a particular density of prey that allows it to grow, particular density of prey below which they have to decline. So it's a straight up and down line and a humped isoocline. Let's make that humped isoocline show a refuge. Look like that. Okay, so what this does is ensure that if the prey density gets below a certain point, the predators can't eat them anymore. They can always increase. Now, this is where visualizing how the isoclines have changed is really important. This area here used to be under the straight line, but now it's got a different shape. Well, anytime you're under that line in this quadrant, the two populations will move in this direction. So they'll move towards this line, or they'll move towards that line. This is more or less the same. populations are going this way. Because the prey are under the density of predators required to control them, so they can increase. And the predators have enough prey that they can increase. So the net movement of the two populations is this way. Once you cross this, you're going this way. Because now you have too many predators, the prey have to decrease. All that's changed is that this line has bent down. It used to be straight across, but now it's bent down so that there's extra room for this prey population to have to decrease. What's changed is right here. Now you have only a small region in which both of them decrease. They decrease this way, and then, oops, they go right back, right back. And they basically walk down this isocline until they get dumped back out into this region. This prevents anybody from going extinct. Nobody's going to go extinct in this situation because the predator cannot drive the prey extinct. Every time the prey get below this density, they start increasing again. So if you have enough predators up here that the prey must decrease, then predators increase but prey decrease, yes. And so you move in this direction until you hit that line. Then, in this region, both of them decreased, but they can only decrease to right here. Once they cross that isocline, the prey increase again, forcing them back, prey decrease, prey increase, forcing them back, prey decrease, but then they cross this isocline and the cycle completes. So it's a limit cycle of sorts, but it oscillates right here. But even if this interaction is unstable, the predator can never drive their prey extinct. There's always a place where the prey can escape from their predators. Okay, so anytime you see a kink in this prey isocline, that tells you that we're modeling a situation in which there's a refuge. There's some way that the prey can always escape their predators. They can never be driven extinct, and so these species will coexist, always. They'll oscillate, and sometimes the oscillation will be big oscillations here, but sometimes there'll be small oscillations here, but they will never go extinct. They'll coexist indefinitely. So we've modified now the prey isocline in two ways. We changed it from a line that looks like this, straight across, in the basic model where the predators regulate their prey and nothing else does, to the hump where competition near carrying capacity regulates the prey, and a lack of mating opportunities produces slow growth when the population is small, right? And that's what logistic growth is all about. And then we've taken that humped curve and we've broken it and making an isocline that shows a refuge. So we typically don't have refuges unless we're talking about this humped isocline that shows density dependence. You don't get, for instance, this refuge and then a straight across line. That's just not terribly realistic. Right? But we've only paid attention to the prey isocline, haven't we? We haven't done anything with that predator isocline. So the predator isocline is what we call density dependent. It denotes a density of prey that is required for the predator population to grow. If you have more prey than that density, the predator can grow. If you have fewer prey than that density, the predator population has to decline. If you have exactly that density of prey, then the predator population is stable. But here's the problem. It doesn't change with the number of predators, does it? You have this many predators, you need this many prey. You have this many predators, you need this many prey. Does that sound realistic to anybody in the audience here? That you need the same number of prey to support a population of 2 predators as would be required to support a population of 20,000 predators? Because that's what this says. This says that the number of predators is irrelevant. You just need this many prey. Isn't that kind of stupid? Okay, that's a density-dependent predator. If we relax that assumption and allow larger populations of predators to need more prey, then how would that change that line? We're not changing the prey line anymore, we're changing the predator line. Well, if you have a few predators, you should only need a few prey. But if you have a lot of predators, you should need more prey. So what will the line look like instead of a straight up and down line? Would you care to say it out loud? Slanted. It'll be a slanted line, yeah. Okay, so instead of a specific density, a single number that regulates predators, we're not going to have a density-dependent predator anymore. We're going to have a predator that requires some fixed ratio of prey. So maybe each predator requires 10 prey. So if you have 2 predators, you'd need 20 prey to allow that population to grow. If you had 20 predators, you'd need 200 prey for that population to grow. Now we're talking not about a fixed density, but about a fixed ratio. X versus Y has a fixed slope, but it's a slanted line now. So this was realized by a guy named Arditi, and so we named this after him. He's the source of your problems today. But this is what a ratio-dependent predator would look like. Here, the number of predators depends on the ratio between prey density and predator density. Okay? So for every 1 predator, you need X number of prey. So if you have like 1 predator, you need this many prey. If you have 10 predators, you need this many prey. That's way more realistic. But now look at this this intersection point here. That's stable. If you have ratio-dependent predators, you almost always have a stable equilibrium. You almost always have stable coexistence indefinitely. So that's a cool thing. So now we have an explanation for why we so often have predators and prey that manage to coexist in nature without, these obvious cycles, and why the predator never drives the prey extinct. An awful lot of predators and their prey are going to have a stable equilibrium because the predator is ratio dependent. In fact, you might be asking yourself, well, duh, why aren't all predators ratio dependent? Talk about that in a minute. Now, theoretically, you could move this point, you could move this line around. You could move it over here, slanted, and of course the intersection would be there. But you could also move it here so that you have a y-intercept. Now what that would imply is that the population of predators could grow even if the population of prey were 0. Does anybody have an idea how that would be possible? How could a predator population grow even if the population of its prey is 0? Because we see that.
They would be omnivores?
They might, well, not necessarily omnivores, but they might have a second prey. They might be a generalist. So far, we've been talking about a predator that eats a single prey species. But in this case, this predator population can grow even if there are 0 of these prey. that clearly says that this predator has more than one prey species. Okay, so this is an important thing to understand. You can have a ratio-dependent predator that has a sloped line. You need to be able to recognize that. You need to be able to say, to understand that ratio-dependent predators generally have stable equilibria with their prey. But you also need to recognize the situation in which the predator has more than one prey. Now look at this. This is kind of cool because now you have how many equilibria? Well, how many times do the lines cross? Two. You have two equilibria. This is clearly a stable equilibrium. What about this one? Is that stable or unstable? Ooh, got to diagram these. Got to figure out which way the lines go. Well, okay, so you have to be able to recognize that this line has been tilted from the straight up and down line. So the straight up and down line has gone this way. So if you have this number of prey, the predator population can grow. If you are under this curve, the prey population can grow. So in this region, both of them can grow, and they're going to go this way, right there. Over here, the prey must decline because they're above their line, but the predator can increase. They go there. That's why it's stable. Here, the prey can increase, but the predators have to decrease. So they move that way. So this is where it gets tricky when the predator isocline gets tilted, because this is the region where the predator can grow up, up, and up. These are the regions where the predator must decline, down, down, down. So around this, you go this way, this way, this way, and this way. This is stable. If you are here and you move away from that equilibrium, what will happen? Depends on which quadrant you go into, right? Because they move in different directions. If you move from here to here, what will happen? Which way will the two populations go? Will they go this way, this way, this way, or this way? In this area here. First ask yourself, what will happen to the prey? Can the prey increase in this area? Taylor says yes. Does anybody disagree? Prey increase. What happens to the predator? Decrease. So you move here. Are you going to go back? No. The two populations will move this way until they cross that line, in which case both populations increase. If you move away from this point into this area, then you will walk down this isocline to the stable equilibrium. If you move away from this equilibrium into this area, prey can increase, predators can increase. So if you move away from this equilibrium into this region, you'll go this way, this way. You'll again walk down the isocline to stability, to the other equilibrium. What happens if you go to one of the other two? If you go here, the predator must what? Increase or decrease in this area? Decrease. And what happens to the prey? Is it above its isocline or below? Above, it has to decrease. Dalina? What happens to the prey in this region here when it's on this side of its isocline? Remember, this used to be the straight across thing, and we bent it down. So you are above the number of predators required to control the population. So you have too many predators. So the prey must decrease. So if you move into this region, the predators decrease, the prey decrease. You go this way. You go away from that equilibrium. Now if you go into this region, prey are decreasing, predators are increasing. So if you go here, you're going to walk down this isocline to, what's that result? Extinction of the prey, exactly. And the system will collapse. So this is an unstable equilibrium. If you go away from this region, you'll never go back. You'll either go up here to the stable equilibrium or the prey will go extinct. Now fortunately the predator has something else to eat, so it won't go extinct, but the prey has gone extinct. Now you can see how we can start to accommodate a whole bunch of complexity that we might see in nature when we have a predator eating not one, but several different prey, which is really typical. You don't often have a specialist predator that eats only a single species of prey. They often eat multiple species of prey. And now it's possible to see how you can diagram the local extinction of one of those prey species, and yet the predator doesn't go extinct, it just simply switches to another prey. There's another issue that we haven't dealt with about the predators, which is, what if you have like two prey and two predators and a million prey? Okay, even if it's ratio dependent, will adding another prey do anything to the predator population? If you have 1,000,001 prey, will that make a difference to the predators? No, because they can't use them all. They can't possibly make use of them all. In fact, the predator isocline is eventually going to flatten out, and it's not going to matter how many prey you have. It's not going to affect the predator population. Recall that we talked about nesting birds, right? And they depend on insects to raise their young. But at some point, it doesn't matter how many insects are out there. They're not limited by insects anymore. They're limited by something else, by nest sites. So as the prey population increases, eventually it's irrelevant, and something else limits the predator. So they can't make use of the extra prey. Well, that simply means that their ability to use the prey becomes saturated. So when you get this line going over flat, what it means is that the predators can't use these extra prey over here. Their capacity to use them is saturated, and they're limited by something else. If it's birds, which are my favorite illustration because everybody kind of understands the relationship between having a place to build a nest and having a food supply. With nesting birds, it's often nest sites. Like, it doesn't matter how many insects you have here if there are no nest sites. They can't use those extra prey, so the predator population doesn't continue to, the predator use of prey doesn't continue to increase. Now, this is interesting because we can have a density-dependent predator that eventually saturates, and that's kind of like this. Or we could have a ratio-dependent predator that saturates. Now, something to understand is that if your predator is limited by something other than prey, where is the equilibrium going to be? Where will the lines cross? If it's going to go up and then go over like this, where will the lines cross? Unstable, cycling, or stable? What will it be? Jasmine?
Stable.
Stable. It'll always be stable. So this is another thing that promotes stability, and it helps explain why predator-prey systems are often more stable than you might expect. If predators are ratio dependent, they're going to be stable, equal interactions. If predators are limited by something other than their prey, they will also be stable. Okay? So let's look at a couple of examples of how you might generate some complexity here. Here's one where you have a predator-prey system that is currently at an unstable equilibrium, right? So this is a ratio-dependent predator. You need to recognize that. You need to be able to tell me on an exam. That line indicates that we have a ratio-dependent predator, not a density-dependent predator. And you have alternative prey. There's not a refuge in here, but the prey do experience density-dependent growth. And typically, for even remotely realistic predator-prey systems, you'll always see this humped isocline where density dependence is occurring. Competition near carrying capacity, lack of mates down here, and the golden mean here lets the prey population grow rapidly. So you need the most predators to control the prey population right here. You need very few here because there's not much reproduction going on because they can't find mates. You need very few predators to control the population here because competition within the prey is so intense that they can't grow anyway. This is their carrying capacity. Okay? So that is an example of something I might ask you to analyze. Now, this is unstable. You need to recognize that if you go into this region, you'll walk down this isocline to stability. If you go into this region, you will again walk down this isocline to stability. If you go here, you'll go to extinction. And what I want you to do on the homework is to think about how the changes in these isoclines relate to that basic cross isocline pattern that we got the very first time, where we had this and this and this and this, and we got the cycling. And I want you to visualize how to translate the straight up and down isocline for the predator into this slanted one, because this is increase, increase, and increase. This is decrease, decrease, decrease. Even though it's tilted now, you maintain the same relationship between the sides of this thing. This is the right side, where the predator increases. This is the left side, where the predator decreases. This is the underneath for the prey isocline, where the prey can increase. This is the above region where prey must decrease. I want you to try to work from the basic Lotka-Volterra system and translate the way those arrows look in the simple crossed isocline pattern to how they're going to look here. Because you need to be able to tell me, if I give you a random point, say here, you need to tell me which way those two populations will move. If it's over here, they're going to go straight to the stable equilibrium. Here's a second example that has a prey refuge, and now you see you have not one, not two, but three equilibria. Okay, yeah, well, this is getting kind of Byzantine, right? But you know that this one's always stable, you know that this one's always unstable. You know that you always go this way, this way, this way, and this way. You know that you're going this way here and this way here. So you basically have this extra thing. What is that? Which way do you move there? Well, you are above the prey isocline, so the prey have to increase or decrease? Decrease. Prey are going to decrease. But you're on the right side of the predator isocline, so the predators will increase. So you're going to go that way, that way, that way, that way. This is actually a pretty stable equilibrium. As long as you don't get a really huge manipulation that takes you way down here, if you do go down there, you're going to go this way. But if you go down here, you'll just go this way and go right back. So this is stable, unstable, kind of stable. And the way that you know this is by recognizing the direction that the two populations will move. They always move this way, this way, this way, this way. This is why you have to be proficient at translating the basic movement of the two populations from that very simple Lotka-Volterra crossed lines where it's easy to understand this way, this way, this way, and this way. It gives you the cycling. You have to be proficient in translating that onto a graph where we've messed with the way the lines look. So that's what the homework this weekend is going to be about. We'll start you out with a very simple model where you just have 4 arrows. You have that cycle. And then we'll give you each of the modifications. And I'm going to give you a point for every arrow you get correct. Yeah, so there's a lot of points potentially on this homework. Be sure you do this one. Also, it's important to recognize what the intercepts mean. What do the intercepts actually mean? Well, remember that if we allow the prey isocline to be bowed like this, it's going to hit 0 at some density of the prey right here. Notice that this is a big density, and yet the prey population is not able to grow anymore. So what's that point? It's carrying capacity. It's K. You need to be able to recognize when K is visible on these graphs. For the basic model, you need to be able to recognize what the intercepts are for the crossed lines. D divided by AP for the predator, which is always on the x-axis, right? And DP on the y-axis for the prey. Now let's see, do we have an an intercept here for the prey population. We don't. There's no intercept there. But there is an intercept for the predator population right here. It's shifted from here, where we normally expect it, over here because it's a ratio-dependent predator. Now, what I want you to be able to do is to recognize when you have an X-intercept for the predator. It would not be really strictly correct to say that this was the DAP point, because that would actually be somewhere down here, because that's an X-intercept. Okay, the Y-intercept would be for the prey population, and we don't have one of those either. So there's neither one of those on this graph, but on the basic Leica-Volterra graph where you have the crossed lines, you have those intercepts. Be sure that you can associate the label for each of those with the X or Y intercept, and also recognize where K exists. Okay, so all it's going to be is repetition. Draw the lines, draw the arrows, pointing in the correct directions. Get a point for each of those that you draw correctly. Also, which is the prey isocline? Which is the predator isocline? In every case, you need to be able to recognize them. This is the prey isocline. This is the predator isocline. You need to be able to label those for me. So that's how the homework's going to go. Questions? And you may get more than one homework with this stuff, just to give you extra practice. All right. Well, much as we saw that evolution affects competition through character displacement, we can ask, how does evolution affect these predator-prey systems, or exploiter-victim systems, as the case may be? And so we can take one of these basic, take one of these basic systems. Let's just have a real simple density-dependent predator. Remember, this is density-dependent. There's a fixed density here. It's not ratio-dependent. But we have a prey population that shows density-dependent growth. Well, how will evolution affect this interaction? Well, first let's ask how natural selection might affect predators. So think of coyotes catching rabbits, right? Coyotes chase rabbits. Rabbits run away from coyotes. What would natural selection do to coyotes? They're in competition to catch rabbits. So over time, what would natural selection do to coyotes? If you have a coyote that's good at catching rabbits versus one that's not so good at catching rabbits,
Only the fastest one would survive.
only the fastest one. It's not that the fastest one would survive, it's that the fastest one would reproduce more. Yeah, they'd have the higher fitness. And over time, faster coyotes will come to dominate the coyote population. Now, if you have faster coyotes, they're better at catching rabbits, right? So they get more energy to reproduce. And even if there are fewer rabbits, because they're better at catching rabbits, they can still get enough energy to reproduce, right? So how many rabbits do they need in order for the population to grow? They start out here, but if natural selection is making them faster and faster, what happens to this line? What will happen to that line over time as they need fewer and fewer rabbits to grow because they're better and better at catching them? how will that line change? Well, you're pointing. Okay, well, let's refresh our memories about what this line indicates. This is the density of prey required for the predator population to increase. If you are better at catching prey, and you can reproduce at lower densities of prey because you're better at catching them, how will that line move over time? Cameron, do you have an idea? Over time, we'll move to the right. So you'll need more prey, you'll need a higher density of... Okay. This line will move to the left. You'll need a lower density of rabbits in order for you to reproduce because you're better at catching them. Natural selection on predators moves this line to the left. But what does that do to the equilibrium? What kind of an equilibrium is this? Stable. What kind of an equilibrium is this? Unstable. Natural selection on predators destabilizes the interaction. If you get better at catching your prey, you're more likely to drive them extinct. Okay, that's not so good. Do rabbits deal with this lying down? Do they just let coyotes kill them all and go extinct? What happens when coyotes get better at catching rabbits? What happens to the rabbits? They don't necessarily overproduce, but which rabbits are the coyotes catching first? The slow ones, exactly. Leaving what in the rabbit population? The fast ones. So natural selection on coyotes to catch rabbits kills all the slow rabbits, leaving only fast rabbits, which does what to that isocline? Pushes it right back. So there is a balance between natural selection on the predator, always trying to make them better at catching their prey, and on the prey, always getting better at eluding their predators. Selection on the prey restores the balance. And what that means is that predators and prey are locked in a never-ending race to get better and better at dealing with each other. Predators are always getting better at catching their prey. Prey are always getting better at avoiding their predators. They're basically running as fast as they can to stay in the same place. We maintain the stable equilibrium because selection on predators is exactly matched by selection on prey. Well now, from your high school English class, if you are running as fast as you can to stay in the same place, you are in what land? You're in Wonderland. Because that is what the Red Queen said to Alice. Alice said, in my country, we run as fast as we can to get from one place to another. And the Red Queen said, in my country, we run as fast as we can to stay in the same place. So, this is called the Red Queen hypothesis. And it's from Through the Looking Glass. It's the idea that both predator and prey are locked in a never-ending race just to avoid the system collapsing and one or the other or both going extinct. We think that this is one of the single most powerful forces in nature. And it explains a lot about human biology, for instance. Coevolution with your predators. Okay. Now, that's kind of how selection on predators is counterbalanced by prey. What happens if we allow selection to work on prey in the same way? Well, so we start out with a prey isocline that looks like this. If the prey get better at using their resources, and they can reproduce on lower levels of resources, what will happen to their carrying capacity? Yeah, you're making hand movements, but will their carrying capacity decrease or will it increase? If they're better at using their resources, should it increase? Okay. The alternative is if we supplement the food of a prey. This is where this paradox of enrichment comes in. That's the title we give it, and it's because we discovered it not by watching prey get better at using their resources, but by giving them more resources. So we increase the resources for the prey, and it gets you a higher population. But what does that do to the interaction? Here's the original interaction. That is what? Stable or unstable? What about this one? It's now kind of unstable. Once again, that selection on prey to be more efficient at growing their population destabilizes that interaction. Now, we learned this to our sorrow by trying to supplement the food of things that we wanted to cultivate, like supplemental feeding of deer in the winter. The deer population went extinct. Well, how the hell did that happen? Well, it's because it destabilized their interaction with their predators. So, helping the population hurt it. Now, in the paradox of enrichment, it's important to understand, this is what? What kind of a predator is this? This is a what dependent? Density dependent. What if it was a ratio dependent predator? Would you see the same thing? You would not. Ratio dependent systems remain stable even if the prey get better at using their resources or if we supplement. So the natural tendency of evolution working on either predator or prey is to potentially destabilize the interaction. Okay, and only selection on the other partner can restabilize it. That's the red queen in action. So we are done for today. I'll be giving you homework later today that we'll have due Monday. I'll let you know about what adjustments to the schedule we're going to try to make. All right? I'm going to go home and rest. I'm not going to hold office hours this afternoon. Okay? So we will see you on Monday.
I have a quick question about Innovate UNO sent out the survey thing that we have to fill out.
Right.
So